Roblox is boring, and I don't mean the platform as a whole, but I mean the games that are currently trending on Roblox. I mean, come on, it's filled with terrible games like this one. Wait a minute. That are honestly just not that fun for a college-age kid like me. But today, that changes. My goal is to make a very fun and high-quality RPG adventure game. I spent hours of my middle school years playing this fun game called Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So I'm gonna be taking a lot of inspiration from that to try and match the feel of that open-world adventure-style game. But to make a good adventure game like this, I'm gonna need a really cool story. And here's a little bit of the game lore so that you can get excited. You and your friends are the sons and daughters of the current king and queen. One day, as you were playing out in the forest of the peaceful kingdom, a power-hungry dragon convinces all the creatures of the kingdom to join his side and overthrow the king and queen. Every single human is locked in the dungeon, except for you and your friends. Now you need to journey to the castle to save not only your parents, but the entire kingdom from this dragon. And that's the basic idea of the story. There's gonna be a lot more details and lore, but you're just gonna have to wait for the game to see it. Okay, now that we have the story, let's go ahead and start making the game. Or we could play Legend of Zelda for the next 2 hours. Okay, for real, let's go ahead and start making the game. I started out by planning some of the enemies for the game. I actually made a ton of terrible drawings to help me figure out what the game was gonna look like. One of the enemies I drew was a little mushroom that I called Mush. It's short for mushroom. Get it? Because he's so small, Mush wouldn't be able to deal a lot of damage, and to give it a little flair, he was gonna front flip to move around. Oh, and by the way, if I make a room for all of these guys, that would be the Mush Room. Please don't unsubscribe. So let's get started with making Mush. I hopped into a 3D modeling software called Blender to start making Mush. Now bear in mind, I am a programmer and not a modeler, so we're gonna see how this turns out. Now it doesn't look fantastic, but after a little while, this is what I came up with. Then I made a basic texture on Photopea and applied it to the mesh, and there we go, that's what Mush is gonna look like. Yes, he could definitely look better, but because I'm not a modeler, I think this is a win. I also made 2 different variants. One was super small and blue, and then there was a big one that was green. So now there were 3 different mushes, that sounds really weird, that were gonna randomly spawn in the game. But do you remember how earlier I told you that Mush was gonna have some super epic parkour skills? Yeah, he kinda just sits and falls over right now. So let's go ahead and fix that. Now the best way to do that, in my opinion, would be to create some animations for Mush. Now fortunately for me, I have a great reputation of being the world's best animator. Wait, who made that animation? So this should be a piece of cake. And by a piece of cake, I mean it'll take me several hours to finally figure out what the heck is going on because Roblox wasn't working and I spent 2 whole days trying to figure out. I'm not mad. Okay, but on the second day of trying to do this, I finally got it working. For some reason, it just wouldn't work the first time, but once I reanimated it all, it just randomly worked. I don't know why, but it did. Okay, so cool. Mush now can do some awesome parkour. But the only problem is that Mush is currently front flipping in place right now. I mean, he can't move at all. So now it's finally time to get to what I'm good at, the scripting. I created a function that used a mixture of tween service and pathfinding service to figure out where the mush would go. Then I compared the magnitude of all the players to the mushroom to figure out who was the closest. Now in normal person terms, that just means that I figured out which character was closest to the enemy and then made the enemy move smoothly to the closest player while doing some awesome front flips. And it totally worked! Wait, why are you facing backwards? After a little bit of fixing the code, it finally worked, and I had the very first enemy of the game done. The next thing I did was just take the other variants I made and change some variables such as their speed and their attack radius to make sure that the different variants behaved a little bit differently. And pretty soon I had a bunch of terrifying mushrooms following me all around. Okay, so the next thing to do is to subscribe. Okay, obviously I'm joking, but we're trying to hit 100K, which is a big dream of mine, and we're so close to hitting it, so I'd really appreciate it if you could take a couple seconds to subscribe, and thank you so much. Okay, so we have a bunch of killer mushrooms following the players around, which is awesome, but there's a problem. I don't know if you noticed, but I can't fight back. In an adventure game like this, it is crucial that players have a sword or a weapon that they can fight back with, and we just don't have that yet. So I guess the next step is to script a sword. Now, as you progress in the game, I wanted the swords to get better and better, but you were going to start out with something simple like a stick. So I started by modeling a quick stick in Blender, which I then imported into Roblox, and it's time to begin scripting the sword system. I used what's called object-oriented programming to make the combat system. I'm not going to bore you with a detailed explanation, but basically that just means that I created my own sword objects to be able to reference later on. And in the process of making it, I almost indexed the sword's default table and translated it into English. That basically just means I have no idea what I'm doing. See, I rarely use object-oriented programming, but I'm trying to get used to it because it's supposed to be super efficient. Hey nerd, nobody cares, just move on with the video. Okay, fine. After a little bit, I got it working fine. I created a basic spawning in function that would set some default values for the sword, such as the name of the sword and how much damage it does. Then I created a new function for whenever the player swings the sword. In that function, I checked to see if the player had swung the sword in the last 3 seconds, and if they haven't, then I would just reset their combo. But having a combo wouldn't make any sense if I didn't have some different animations, so I guess it's time to go do some more animating. I made 3 total animations for the sword. One was a front swing, one was a back swing, and one was a big spin swing. Then I added the animations to the script, and now the animations were playing. Cool, so the basics work, but now it's time to actually damage the enemies. For that, I created an actual hitbox, like that would check to see if you hit something, and positioned it right in front of the player. Then I checked to see if any of the enemies were inside of that hitbox, and if so, I dealt damage to the enemy. Psst! I saw Dan Codes do something similar for a hitbox, so credit goes to him for this method. I also made this cool little health bar that'll smoothly tween when it gets damaged. And just like that, we can now damage enemies. Oh, and I also added some particles and sound effects to make it even more polished. And there we go, the combat system is done. Now there's one really small problem with this game, and that's that it's currently just a base plate. So there's currently no map in the game, and that's really important for an adventure game like this. So I guess I should start making the map. Now remember, I'm taking a lot of inspiration from Zelda and the open world feel that it has. And that means that the map is gonna be huge, like the biggest map I've ever built, which means I'm gonna need some help. Hey bro, you down to make an adventure game?
I mean, not really. My schedule's pretty busy right now.
Perfect. Here's everything I need from you. Trees, mountains, a well, enemies, all your money. Campfires, tents, caves, swords, chests, other enemies. I think that's it. You're the best, bro. Thank you so much.
No, I didn't really...
Okay, awesome. He agrees and is very happy to do this job. So let's get started on the map. We made this basic layout that had a few different enemy camps, as well as huge mountains in the center of the map. The layout looks really cool, so I'm stoked to see how it's gonna look once the map is actually finished. Abro modeled some stylized trees and a well that looked super good, and I used the brush tool to start scattering them around the map. I also made some super simple mountains in Blender and imported them into Roblox. Then I used Roblox's terrain system to make some grass and dirt for the ground. And I gotta say, once we put everything in there, it's starting to look really cool. I also made a stone pathway and a climbing area up to the first enemy camp in the mountains. And up in the enemy camp, I scattered a bunch of mushes, still sounds really weird, around the area. And soon we're gonna add a chest to all of the enemy camps so that once you defeat all the enemies, you're gonna get some cool rewards. Also, we need to come up with a name for this game. Kings, queens... Wait. Yeah, that's pretty much exactly how I came up with the name for the game. But hey, it works. There is still so much to do, so let us know down in the comments if you want us to continue working on the Lion Soul Saga. I'd be down to make a part 2. Huge thanks to Yuktpie, The Blindsy, Pear, and Deja Vu for supporting me on Patreon and on the channel. If you want to get shoutouts at the end of my videos, either join on Patreon down in the description or click the join button on my channel. And if you like this video, I think you're gonna like the one on screen now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.